Running an agency doesn't have to feel like juggling flaming chainsaws. At Schmidt Consulting Group, we help you ditch the chaos, land more clients, and even enjoy running your business again. No fluff, no BS, just strategies that actually work. Check us out at schmidtconsulting.group because your agency deserves better.
Ready to unlock the secrets of building a business you can actually sell? Join Kurt Schmidt as he interviews Albert Banks, a seasoned agency founder, about growth, valuations, and creating a sellable company.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I just want to take a moment to introduce my new friend, Albert Banks. Albert, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
So tell me about the work that you do and who do you work with?
Yeah, so I'm, I guess, a recovering agency owner. I own my own company for a little over 2 decades. Started as a computer engineer and then grew into running the business for the most part. Your sexy stuff, finance, operations, IT, office, legal. So learned a lot. Went through a merger about 7 years ago, and then ultimately a sale about 3 years ago. And now I'm out helping other service firms with their businesses rather than my own. So covering some of the same things around operational excellence, finance, how to have great employees experience, and then potentially look at an exit and what that might be like. Typically small to mid-sized businesses, service-based, obviously agencies are key, oftentimes working with the founder or CEO during the leaderships.
That's really cool because in my experience with agency owners, usually this is the last job they ever want to have, right? So they don't really have any plans to sell, or the whole reason they're building the business is to sell. I feel like I rarely run into a middle ground there. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you described me, like when we first started, we didn't even know we could sell such a thing that we were creating, right? That's how naive we are. And so certainly you see people anywhere from that end of the spectrum to those who are very much ready to exit. And so where I like to try to find people is somewhere in between, right? Where there's room to improve your business, whether you're going to sell it ultimately, or you're going to continue to run it and you enjoy your time while you're doing that.
Yeah, it's something I coach my agency clients on. If we do broach that subject, I don't really spend as much time on the finance side as much as you do, but if it does come up, it's definitely something where you should run your business like you were going to sell it, because I think that's a healthy way to have this accountability towards excellence and towards building a safe space. Is, in your experience, the idea of getting ready to sell your company or broaching the idea, is that where you start? Where do you start with people on? Do you start just immediately talking to them about EBITDA?
No,
or what do we do?
Absolutely not. Look, most people, number one, it's a unique person who can be an entrepreneur. Often they say, right, they're unemployable. They're people who, typically the ones that are successful are risk takers, right? And so it's a unique type of person, and they've built a company sort of in their own image. And so I typically want to understand, like, what do they want, right? Because it is their business, right? Is this hey, you want to run this for 20 years? You want to bring home income, or hey, you've got 5 years left in the tank and you do want to sell it, right? Understanding the dynamics between partners if there are multiple, right? So really understanding these individuals and what they're trying to get out of it is the starting point, right? Because that's ultimately what's going to drive it at the end of the day. But also sure that it's a challenge, right? There's low odds that you're going to sell, right? Like it's, I don't know, 1-2%. If you're well organized and prepared, maybe that rises to 20-25%. So just being realistic about what it would take to ever even get to that point. Sometimes you'll see partners that are frustrated, like they're overloaded in one area, they're too involved in the business, or they're too separated from something, but it's because it's been just sort of a lifestyle. It's been their baby. So getting them to look at it like an asset a little bit more, like this is a real business, and you'll be ultimately happier if you run it that way. And so, I agree with you. Run it like you're going to sell it, even if you're not. Our early days, gosh, so much of it was chasing revenue, trying to make payroll, right? That led us to take bad clients or misaligned projects. But as we matured, we realized, like, hey, this has got to be a profitable business. If we're going to grow, we have to be able to grow profitably, right? So that changed. We dropped clients, repositioned at different points in the agency, updated our ICP. And having that sort of discipline allowed us to have books that looked good, regardless of whether we were selling it. But ultimately, when we did sell, there wasn't a lot we had to do because we had a business we could sell.
I meet some of these agency owners sometimes very early in their journey, and they're very much like running a business out of their parents' basement. It feels like, even though they have Nike as like a client, right? Like, so it's really interesting because there is a bit of imposter syndrome, and I hate to overuse that term, where I see so many agencies have this fear of becoming corporate. It's like this boogeyman that they've come up with, that if they have too much process, or if they involve lawyers, or if they get a CFO, or God forbid they get HR, like, they have become corporate. And again, nobody can describe to me what corporate means other than maybe like micromanagement. But what I do see is that as some of these owners mature and maybe they reach out and seek out help, some of these owners will join like a Vistage or some other sort of leadership group. And once they're peered up with other business owners that are not maybe in the agency business, and they see their concerns and the things that those people are concerned about, I see a dramatic change happen there, because they're like, oh, okay, you should really do this or do that. What's the typical journey, or is there a typical journey that you've seen?
Yeah, I think there's a natural stages in particular for agencies that you see when they go some of that basement mentality. We did it. I literally worked like my first partner until they get sort of that point of, okay, we're sort of stable here, right? We're starting to grow. And then you reach a certain size and it's time to scale. And sort of at each of these inflection points, there's a level of maturity that needs to happen. And I call it like operational hygiene, right? It's about running a good business, where how it relates to the sale is it's defensible, right? Like, you have evidence, you have the information needed when it comes time for that. But I always look at it like security and protection. Like, as the owners, we're responsible for all of our team members and our clients, and right, having things buttoned up, having contracts buttoned up, IP covered, clean financials, right? And then it's defensible. And then when you get into sale, right, you get into due diligence, you're under a microscope, and all of those things sort of come out. When we sold, you're getting requests for hundreds of documents. Every one of your client MSAs, SOWs, employee agreements, leases, they want all kinds of specific detail, measurement, calculation, going back years, right? And honestly, that wasn't that huge of a lift for me. It took a lot of time, but we already had these systems in place. We were already tracking those things, and maybe there's just tweaks to how we needed to present it. And so we were able to continue our growth and hit our margins while we're going through this really big distraction. If we weren't buttoned up, gosh, it would have been very, very challenging, specifically for me and the team, but we could have taken a haircut on the value of the business, right? They could have seen just disorganized and risky, and therefore not being willing to pay ultimately what they did. Yeah, I think in the near term, if you're not selling, it's a responsibility and kind of sort of growing up and reaching some of those middle stages of your organization. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it'll pay off if you ever do.
I want to talk about the elephant in the room, evaluation. So, because just like a homeowner selling a house, they always think it's worth more than it is. Businesses are no different, at least from my experience, because I've been able to buy and sell businesses in my career, and they always overvalue what they have. What is the process to go about understanding, and maybe not exactly come up with that exact number, Albert, because maybe you don't know a number until somebody gives you one, but is there a process or things I could be doing to get an idea of what that might look like, and what how to set my own expectations?
And I think some of it is just fundamentally understanding the math behind how a service business is valued, right? It's not based on revenue, it's based on EBITDA, right? So you need to run a profitable and scalable kind of system. And I didn't know that when I first started, right? I'm thinking about revenue and the growth and not thinking about margin. But yeah, once you sort of understand that starts to change how you look at your business. So starting with your EBITDA and then understanding that it's a multiple, right? And that multiple scales with your size. And so the larger you are, the larger that multiple can be. Not that that means you have to grow if that's not something you want to do, but you can run a very profitable company at the size that you feel comfortable. It's sort of that simple math right there. And then it's avoiding any kind of risks. Client concentration, employee attrition, any kind of risks within your contract. Do you have sticky clients, repeatable work, or do you have a lot of turnover there? Are you more project-based or time and materials versus retainer or ongoing relationships, long-term engagements? Do you have a positioning that's sort of defensible and helps you be unique in the market? Do you have a sort of a sales engine so to speak, whether that's external or inbound or whatever it may be, but something that's sustainable and can keep going. So yeah, I think once you start understanding literally how the math works and the factors that could sort of ding you or work in your favor, they're almost all the same things that are running a good business.
Yeah.
If you have that sort of mindset, it can be beneficial. I thought my company was worth way more when I first started out until I understood the math. And it was fairly straightforward after that. A little bit of subjectivity here and there, depending on the buyer and the demand. But yeah, it actually can be pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I remember a lot of the clients I work with, one of the things I work with them is building a better outbound engine, right? Because a lot of agencies are built off of referrals, right? They don't really have a way to build an outbound engine. And that's something I help them with a lot. And part of the conversation comes up is just like you said, it's to help stabilize and be able to forecast in order to start to understand those numbers better, plus to make them look more attractive. So in your experience, Albert, I've experienced a few different ways of why somebody wants to buy an agency. I've seen people that want to buy because of the client list. So they want to roll your clients into my larger business. I've seen in the past where they've bought because of the employees. They're like, wow, you do a lot of mobile work and we want to do more mobile work. So we want to buy you and roll you into our place. And then I've seen people where they want to get them for the revenue that's happening, but it's almost feels like that is almost more rare. Is that been your experience? Or not to say that revenue doesn't matter. It's just in my experience, it's not that somebody's coming in and buying it saying, wow, you've got a really profitable business here. I want to buy it and just run it the way you've been running it. Usually what I've seen is people have, wow, I see a real opportunity here, but it's a little dusty and could use some love. If I roll it into my bigger process and system, I could really streamline this and make a bunch of money off of it. What's been your experience, Albert?
Yeah, all of those scenarios you described are totally out there. And I see it's usually a multiple of those factors. And maybe the buyer has a priority of them, right? Like maybe somebody is very much attracted to the type of services you provide because it's complementary to what they currently do. And they see an opportunity there, maybe to diversify or maybe to gain additional clients and grow sort of with that collaboration. But then at the same time, they're going to want to see you have a new biz engine and you have a good team as well. The flip side to that is, what does the person who's selling look for? All right. And that's kind of how I look at the buyers is you need to go look at these potential buyers and what is their motivation? And does that jive with what you would want your end game to look like, right? You've got to find a match there between your priorities and their priorities. And if they're misaligned, if it's really a numbers thing and you're all about the numbers, great. Maybe it's a good pairing and that's something you go forward with whereas if you're more about, hey, I want my second in command to lead and have a career here, well, you got to think about what does the buyer want? Are they going to turn around and sell again in 3 years? And that future doesn't exist. So again, jiving the rationale and reasons and priorities for buying and those that are selling, that's how you have to consider what a good fit is. Ultimately, they're service businesses, right? You're buying the people. You can't forget that. And if your buyer doesn't understand that, there could be challenges. If you're creating a situation where your people don't want to stay, inevitably your clients will leave and that will be not a good purchase at the end of the day. So finding folks that truly understand that as your buyer, I think is really, really important.
So let me ask you, Albert, while I was running my agency, I would get every couple of months, somebody would be like, hey, are you interested in selling? You get an email or a LinkedIn DM or lots of different things. How do you know if somebody's serious or somebody you should be following up with? What sort of questions should I be asking? How do I know if somebody's serious and whether this is worth my time? What sort of activities could I be doing on my end to validate that?
Either you're like, hey, I'm not interested in selling. Take the meeting, learn everything you can, right? Because you need to understand and go through this and experience and talk to people, hear what the motivations are. Why are people attracted to your company? That's always helpful information. If you're more in the other camp of, oh, I actually might be interested in selling, then you need to be a little bit more deliberate about it, right? You could sort of just vet them offline and see if they're a real thing. You could talk to peers if they're a large enough name, but really you need to understand, like we talked about, the goals. Like, why are they interested in you? What do they see as the attraction? What do they see as the strategy behind it? One of the biggest things is do they have the money, right? Like it is a transaction, right? It's literally a question you ask is, how are you funding this, right? Are they going out and getting an SBA loan? Is it self-funded? Is it proceeds from you over the earn out, right? So that gives you an understanding of their maturity, their seriousness, and if it's even a valid consideration. And so those are probably the top things I would look at when you start having real conversations. But take every meeting that seems legitimate so you can learn.
Yeah, and going back to what you tailed off on in the last question I had for you about where you were talking about you have to think about where you want to end up. Because I know in some of these agencies in private equity, which is happening a lot of private equity stuff where they might be purchasing people, or these big giant firms like Accenture or Deloitte or these other ones have been gobbling up more agencies. In a lot of those, I've seen where they have contracts where the founder has to stay on for 2 or 3 years as part of that purchase price. Are those things that you were kind of alluding to earlier?
Yeah, for sure. We were fortunate enough that we made the decision to sell. And so we went to market, right? We sought somebody to buy us rather than sort of just being responsive to those who may knock on the door. And with that became a really intimate conversation with myself and the partner, and ultimately our sort of second in command about what would that future look like, right? In our case, it was our founder was very open and interested to see sort of what a next adventure might be, but he was sort of done operating the business. I didn't want to be number one again because I had done that in my prior agency before the merger, right? And so I knew what I wanted and didn't want, and I was focused on an integration and the operations side, whereas our next in command was interested in that leadership position, right? And so we were able to craft the story, but literally this is how things work and can work in the future, so that when we went to the buyers, it was more they could react to the future that we individually wanted versus them expecting something different or dictating something different. So we could eliminate folks, right? If we had a potential buyer that was private equity backed, but they were going to bring in their own leadership, right? That just totally didn't fit with where we wanted to go, right? And so they sort of disqualified themselves in that case. Yeah, understanding where you want to be. And then you get into earnouts, right? So how long do you want to be tied? If somebody's like, hey, I want to be out day one, well, you're probably still going to have an earnout. You're going to have non-compete. So like the restrictions you're going to face, you really have to see if these things fit with your desired outcome. And of course, things are negotiable, but sometimes that's finding the right buyer. We had a buyer who was cool with a really short earnout, right? There may be others that want to do that full 3-year earnout. It truly is a matter of fit for what you want for your future.
Yeah, the idea of what you want for your future makes me think about also what do you want for the team's future, or what does the team want? Because if you've got a sizable organization, you've got a lot of people, there's a culture already pre-built in there. And I've seen a lot of times where people take 2 businesses, 2 cultures, and try to put them together, and it's like opposing magnets. They just bounce off, and that can be very disastrous. What's your advice for people? Like you said, you got together with your partners in leadership and talked about what that looks like. But at some point, I'm sure you had to broach the subject with the rest of the organization that we are going to market, or did you wait until there was an offer and then broach it?
We did it in phases. There was a core group of leadership that we brought in when it was pretty much real, pretty much done. And then sort of a next senior layer that we brought in sort of right before the announcement. And so we kind of did it a little bit in phases. But I'd say where it really helped us with culture is that it was a deliberate effort, right? Like obviously, like buyers, they look at staff turnover and that's a flag, just like client turnover could be. In fact, in our deal, part of our earnout was around employee retention. But we had built, again, because we weren't building to sell it, but we were building a situation where we had career frameworks and salary bands and and culture committees and all of these great initiatives to make it a great place to work, because we wanted to keep the team. We wanted them to influence how we went about things. And so when it came time to sell, we had big enough like trust in us as the owners that they were like, okay, like these folks have been great to us. We've had a good experience. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt that this is a good decision. And we didn't have really hardly any turnover. And I think some of that was because not a lot changed immediately, but I think a big credit is that we had that foundation already established for a change like that took place. Ultimately, when 2 cultures come together, that's challenging. We had to admit to ourselves that would work for some people and not for others. And some people would see it as an opportunity. Some would want to move on. And that's just a reality of really any type of change.
I like that idea, because I remember one kind of small private equity place had originally reached out to us about a project. And it turned out like it was going to be a much larger integration with a lot of companies that they were part of. And so they came to us and said, maybe we buy you and just make you part of the company. And then you can work then you can just work on all these things for all these companies we own. And I was very interested because it seemed like a good fit, but I was pretty clear with them. I was like, okay, hire us for a project first. Let's do one of those companies and then let's see how that goes. And they just did not want to do that. They were like, why don't we just talk about the purchase and things? And that was a big red flag to me about their seriousness versus their cheapness, how serious they were about this working versus, because I was very clear and I thought it would be pretty obvious that like, would you like to date before we got married?
Right.
And they did not seem that interested in that. And that was a big red flag to me. And yeah, that ended up not working because they just kept asking us for a number. And I was like, I don't have a number for you. Sorry.
One of my clients who I think has been tremendously successful with their acquisitions is yeah, they've worked with the other companies probably multiple times, perhaps even across multiple of their companies before it ever gets to that point. So there's already a clear culture connect, and there's an amount of trust, there's an amount of understanding, makes integration even easier when it comes to that point. So 100%. And in our case with the buyer, if I recall right, we were going to take over one of their clients regardless of whether we actually closed the transaction. So like they felt comfortable enough with us as a partner that they were willing to hand off a client. I mean, I think that said a lot to what they see in the value ultimately of us. So yeah, those kind of signals are pretty clear. If someone is really transactional, like it really has to happen, the timing's got to be a certain way, then you decide whether that's a flag for you or not. Or if you're ready to get out quickly, then okay, maybe you just got to go for it. But yeah, if you have the time and you have a well-run business that you're comfortable staying in for a while longer, then yeah, going through that dating period and finding the right fit, it was much preferable.
Yeah. And I would say from my experience too, the faster you want those things to happen, probably the lower the price will end up being, right?
Right. Yep.
Okay. So last couple of questions here, Albert, that I've got for you. The idea of how do you find somebody who wants to buy you? So we just talked about it. A lot of times in my experience, for sure, it's been people, at least within your inner circle network, that maybe are not necessarily the ones that buy you, but maybe are the ones that introduce you to the ones that are interested in purchasing you. But let's say my network maybe isn't that strong or things like that, and I want to start going down this road. Where do you start? How do you go to market with your business?
Yeah. And for us, we hired somebody, I should say an advisor, somebody who is familiar with our space. He does have the network, right? And could guide us along the journey and inform us, teach us how the process goes, help us along the way, and sort of make those connections and run us through a process is what they call it, right? So if you're in that spot and it's not either fortuitous or you have sort of a network where you're sort of on the side seeking buyers, that's the way to kind of do it more formally. Of course, they take a percentage of the deal, but it's one of those things where you only do this probably one time in your life. So it's like when you sell your house, would you want to sell it yourself or get a real estate agent? There's certainly something to having a professional who's gone through this, who can educate you on that, and then either provide you guidance or refer you to people that are focused on tax, that are focused on the legal aspects of it. So having sort of a team when you go to sell is ideal, even if you're approached, right? Like having somebody like that to check in with, or some of those resources are helpful, so you're not doing it completely on your own.
Yeah. Always have a professional help you. You don't need Cousin Eddie, right?
That's right.
I've seen some people bring in Cousin Eddie and it's like, yeah, that's not really going to work. Okay. What's your final thoughts? Any parts that I didn't cover that maybe you want to impart to any of the business owners that are listening here that you want them to consider?
Probably my last thought, which unfortunately is many people's last thought, is the integration, right? When you're joining another organization, or even if you're the acquirer, there's integration that needs to happen. There's so many and way too many examples of really the value that you're trying to create in an acquisition just completely falling apart because of integration not happening or not going well. And there's a lot that's involved there. If you wait till like, hey, we're sold and we're done, and to just start thinking about it, you're in for a world of hurt. And planning for that well in advance and having those conversations with the buyer or you as the seller about what that looks like and getting on the same page really, really is important. And then again, if you're not going to sell, designing your organization and running things in a way where it's a little bit plug and play, right? Like if you were to go from QuickBooks to NetSuite, how dramatic would that be for your organization, right? It's a tool. And so there's some maturity sure that needs to happen there, but how big a lift would that be? And so you can almost sort of practice integration if you're not going to sell, because you're going to go through these stages of maturity where maybe you're going to say, you know what, I'm ready for a HubSpot or Salesforce now. I'm done with Pipedrive. And so there's a change that needs to happen in your organization. Think about how big a lift that actually is. And is it something that you're prepared for? So essentially use those things as practice, right? As you bring on new hires, as you form new departments or new service offerings, almost use that as your practice for the type of change management that integration will require. It requires that planning, it requires advocates, it requires change management. So yeah, I think that's the one thing that people maybe do in their business, but don't, like I didn't ever even really use the term change management until integration, but I realized, gosh, for decades I've been doing this, right? Just without calling it that. So getting the practice at that, again, will help you run your business and go through the growth, but also it's very, very viable if you ever sell or make an acquisition and have to go through an integration with another party.
Albert, you are a fountain of information, and I thank you so much for taking the time to. If I want to reach out to you and learn more about how you're helping people do this every single day, where do I go? Where do I find out more?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Albert Banks. You can check out the website, appertus.co. And I'll be happy to chat with people. I'm in the stage of life where I want to help people succeed and get over the hurdles that maybe I faced when I was younger. Happy to connect with anybody.
Yeah, anybody listening, even if you just are sort of sale curious, Albert's a great guy just to reach out to with some initial questions. He's not a heavy sales tactic guy. He's here to help out. Albert, again, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me.
Thanks for having me, Kurt.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify. It makes a big difference. And be sure to check out schmidtconsulting.group for more ideas and insights. Remember, every big dream starts with a single step. Keep moving forward, stay curious, and don't forget, we're rooting for you. See you next time.